Hello and welcome to the webinar. We are ready to begin our program, so let's get started. I would like to introduce your host and presenter for today's event, Dave Kyle.
Thank you and good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Dave Kyle. I want to cover a few logistics with you here. We will be running the webinar till about 1 o'clock today. And as on the screen indicates, you should hear some audio now. If you don't, there's some dial-in information that you can get to. This is a live event, so we encourage questions that I'll be looking for in the control panel, and you should have access to a control panel there as well that would allow you to direct some questions to us, whether they be about the webinar or even some technical issues that you have as well, too. So with me today is, hello Matt, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Doing great.
Everybody.
I'm glad you could join me. Matt and I work with East Technologies, and we have quite a bit of experience in the industry and provide consulting services to our accounts in the enterprise, education, and small medium business space. You can direct any questions to me afterwards at my email address, dave@easttech.com, and be more than happy to cover a few things with you if we don't cover them on the webinar today. Another set of information is about our company. We're located here in Columbia, Maryland. We were founded in 1993. We provide managed IT services and cloud solutions. Our website is easttech.com, and please feel free to contact us if there's some questions we can help you out with regarding technology for you or your business. So let's get started. So on our agenda today, Matt, we're going to cover a few different areas as the title suggests, of keeping your business secure online. So we're going to take a look at threat examples, what is social engineering, some more details about phishing attacks and as it relates to small and medium-sized businesses, some of the economic impacts of these cyber attacks, and ways to mitigate your risk. And as mentioned, we have some questions and answers that we'd love to hear from you on, so please, by all means, feel free to direct some to us as well. So just a few facts about the situation, and I'm sure everyone is very familiar with all this, and a lot going on, huh, Matt?
Absolutely, it's definitely a hot topic right now.
And we've been sort of keeping close tabs on this for quite a number of years, but the last, I'd say 2 or 3, the amount of information that's been out there for us all to assess, understand, and make adjustments to our businesses has been a lot more readily available, mostly due to the fact that there's been more open acknowledgement of cyber attacks and how these threats have occurred.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, in the past, I think a lot of people have kept quiet on it or may not have realized what was happening to them, and now it is becoming more public. We're certainly sharing articles every week that are new.
And there is certainly an increased threat in all levels of business, and we see it with our own accounts, and we'll explain some of that as well. But we do know that's happening on all levels and sides of organizations, and this is why we're here today. So just a few ideas about this is there are an increased number of businesses that are being affected by this. Actually, the increase, when polled, 9 out of 10 businesses acknowledge that they've felt like they were under some sort of hack or cyber threat over the last year, for example. The number of attacks that are out there that seem to be targeting small and medium-sized businesses is an increase as well. And as I mentioned, this is an increase during 2015 of about 21%. Now, I will say the 21% increase, I don't know the data on this one. I looked at the other data. This one may be just, like we said, people are actually acknowledging that they've been compromised or about to be compromised in some way. So the increase may have been there before, or the hacks may have been there. This is an acknowledgement of the increase. The things we're learning more about some of these compromises, Matt, is that they are pretty quick to happen. So when someone gets malware installed by any number of means, the code that's being written is very quick to act on someone's computer. So the compromise happens within minutes, typically. The exfiltration, which is the act of whatever the malware or the hack wants to have happen, happens typically within days, though. There are times that it doesn't, and we'll explore some of that. So if someone's trying to get a database compromised, it happens quickly at the start of the code, but it finishes off in what they want to do within a few days afterwards. So Matt, you want to share with us this slide a little bit more about what these accounts are and who they represent in our conversation?
Yeah, so these are some of the larger kind of publicized cases that we've been seeing in the last, I'd say, year or so. Certainly some of the big ones like the MedStar Health are more recent. But they represent different categories of hacks, and we're going to talk about more of that in a little bit.
The ones we're going to focus a little bit more on are the accounts like this. And most of them you probably never would have recognized before. They're small and medium-sized businesses. Some are local counties or cities that have been compromised. And these are the kind of situations that, we're a small business, you're a small business, you represent small businesses, many of you are accountants, and these are the kind of situations that these organizations have been affected by, what we've learned from them, and we're going to discuss some of these scenarios to find out how you can better be prepared to deal with the things they've encountered already. So the first question everyone asked was, what are these cyber thieves looking for? Net is money. In most of the cases, they're trying to find a financial gain for themselves. And they kind of do it in a couple different ways, and we'll discuss that. But, obviously the first thing they're doing is finding a way to get money. They do it a couple different ways. Some of it's through personal information that they resell. Sometimes they're actually trying to get to a smaller organization and then ultimately provides them access to a bigger organization, which I call bigger fish. And other types of attacks provide them intellectual property. Again, most small and medium-sized businesses, that's not the case at all. So a little more specifically, in 4 types of online compromises, Matt mentioned some of these larger accounts where we saw Target, OPM, which is the Office of Personnel Management, University of Maryland. These are point-of-sale systems, healthcare companies, but what they're gathering out of here is personal information, whether it be credit card, social security numbers, that they will resell somewhere else. Kind of more recently, we talked about MedStar Health, and even this past spring, there was a wave of ransomware that was recognized. Actually, the ransomware situation is going on for 2 years or more. It's been pretty extensive. They seem to have just targeted healthcare companies this last spring, which got a lot of notoriety for what was going on. Wire transfer heist is something you may not have heard about. We're going to cover that today. This is probably the bigger one for most medium-sized businesses. And I mentioned intellectual property. This is the kind of thing where mostly it's a nation-state situation where someone's going to go target somebody and go after intellectual property. The case of Alcoa was they were compromised, and a lot of the manufacturing process for steel and how they did that was taken over and compromised by some nation-states. Epic Games, they were compromised, and some of their game code was stolen in a sense that, again, intellectual property, no money was taken, but just the intellectual property of the company.
That Epic Games was new to me.
Did you know that one?
Yeah.
I think the unfortunate part, I just read about it this past week, they had a second compromise in the last year, just like a month ago. So it's kind of an ongoing thing. But most of our attention today is going to talk about ransomware and wire transfer heist, because this is really where most small and medium-sized businesses are really affected by the situations that we see. Let's cover a few terms. Matt, do you want to help me out with some of this?
Sure. Yeah. So malware is kind of the broad term that describes any kind of malicious software that is going to be used towards trying to get into your computer. So that's kind of the overarching umbrella term. A virus is a specific type of malware code that's designed to replicate itself. So once it is installed and launched on somebody's computer, it's going to replicate itself either across the network or whatever, sometimes it'll work through email and send out itself to the contacts that are in that person's email, that sort of thing. And then keyloggers is a type of malware that's installed that will allow the other person to be able to record the user's keystrokes. So if they're interested in gaining access to servers, sites, with username and password, they're going to put a keylogger on there and try to record all that information and extract what they're looking for.
Yeah, so malware is kind of like the bigger umbrella. Technically, the term virus and keyloggers fit with inside malware.
They're types of malware.
Great. Phishing is actually a term that's been used to explain how people get compromised. Essentially, phishing is a broad attempt by cyber thieves to send information out, and the term we often use is email phishing, is a more specific area, to masquerade themselves as a trustworthy entity.
Most everybody has seen some type of phishing, particularly recently.
And we have some examples that we'll point out to you coming up here about the emails you can see, look at, and understand. Spear phishing is a little bit more targeted. Okay, and that would be where an organization gets compromised, and the target may be a financial department, it may be executives in the company, or an individual is targeted, and they call that spear phishing. There's actually a term, whaling, too. Have you heard that one before?
I have, yeah, the big fish.
Yeah, whaling would be like someone like a major executive of a major company, or someone like a major public official. So.
And that's the type of thing, and we're definitely gonna look at this in more detail. But that's the type of thing that even the smallest of clients can be affected of, because they may have, friends, clients, partners that will lead someone to someone else or a bigger company. So this is definitely of the moment and for this audience.
The last term I want to mention to you, and we'll bring it back up again, is called phishing. And this is the act of using a telephone to attempt to scam for a person to surrender over private information. So much like email phishing, there's phishing. So it's just a term more recently used. You may hear about it. And what it is just using a phone as opposed to an email to capture information.
I had not heard that term, but I was certainly familiar with
the act of it. So Matt, help us understand. So we all have been using technology, though. We have all these compromises going on, and want to tell us about some of the security we're using and what that means for us today.
So from a current security model, we're talking about the baseline minimum that you need to be worried about and doing on your network. So you need to have a firewall, which we have an example over there of the Sonic wall. That's one type of firewall. There are others. But that's going to be the protection between your network and the internet itself. Antivirus protection and anti-malware protection, you're going to install on the computers on your network. Spam filters, again, may filter out email that's coming from the outside world to your network. And then patch management is just making sure that all of your security devices, including your computers, are up to date with the latest updates. And we've actually started looking at, for our own clients, another level of protection between the firewall and the internet, so that we're actually kind of looking for malicious sites ahead of time and trying to filter those out. So we're looking for increased strategies for that kind of base level protection.
Maybe we want to see if you can adjust your volume just a little bit there, if you can. Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So again, I think the bottom line is we've all put in and invested in money, time, and technologies to put security in place for us as best we can. We actually continue to do so. A lot of this is still evolving. The one thing we want to talk about, though, is kind of this idea of what I call, but defined as what's called social engineering. Is there's always these little compromises built into our technology that these cyber thieves take and use as exploits to get into it. And oftentimes they're not just using just the technology, but they're using psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information that ultimately becomes information they use to gain access to the things they want, which is money, intellectual property, things like that. They're simply, cyber thieves of today are simply the con men that we used to see, or we do see in the movies. So you think of them on the right-hand side of the screen, the Sting. They were con men back then that, found a way to trick somebody into divulging information or actions and arrived at a way for them to get themselves some money. Same thing with Ocean's 11. Matt Damon and George Clooney were characters in a movie that, compromised a casino, and they were con men. And that's what these hackers are today. They're con men, but they can sit somewhere else and use code and trick people into divulging information, getting what they need, and ultimately arriving at getting money.
Tools are new, but the con is the same.
It hasn't changed in years. I'm sure you could look back hundreds and hundreds of years. There's been cons. Yep. Actually, the word con man comes from the word confidence man, which came out in the 1850s. I actually looked this up the other month. So a con man has been around in term for probably 180 years. I'm sure the techniques have been around and are fundamentals for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Let's talk about a few larger hacks, just because I want to mention what's being done and drill down into some smaller businesses. But I mentioned that this is a healthcare hack that happened and infected many of us, if not someone you probably already know in the region. One of the local ones that was affected by this was CareFirst. And basically all three of these healthcare companies insurance companies were compromised, and their personal information of the users were taken. So we think it was a spear phishing attack where the IT credentials were targeted. What the hackers had done to do this was they set up fake websites. And you'll see over here the fake domain name here was CareFirst. And in the case of CareFirst, instead of having the I, they used an exclamation point. So in many of these situations, they'll set up fake websites, have people get an email saying, please, we need to authenticate you again. Go to this website, give us your name, your user information, and your password, and that'll help us out, which is exactly what you don't want to do and exactly what they want you to do. So this particular hack, somehow they got through, then got to the databases and compromised the information from there. CareFirst, I think they talk about 1 million people being compromised. No social security numbers, but Anthem had about 80 million people compromised. Yeah, that's a lot. So, Matt, I'm going to have you talk about this Stuxnet virus.
Yeah, Stuxnet is interesting. This is the first, I'm going to say the first recorded incident where it is a state actor. So the U.S. and Israel collaborated back in 2007 to create a virus that would be a physical attack on Iran's nuclear centrifuges. And what would happen was this virus would launch and cause those centrifuges to spin up probably 100 to 1,000 times faster than they were designed to until they would actually break. What's interesting was how they got these into these computers was they put these on thumb drives, and they dropped the thumb drives in parking lots. So people would come along and pick it up and go, oh, a thumb drive, I wonder what's on it, put it in the computer. Once it's in, it's auto-launch virus, and away it goes. It does its job. What's, whether you think that's a good thing, bad thing, that happened with Iran's nuclear program, which actually did damage it. The bad part is the postscript is that virus then got kind of in the public domain, and a lot of people have taken that baseline code and manipulated it and created new, Stuxnet 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and that's now out in the wild. And we've had a couple of different attacks since then that were built off of that original code. So.
Yeah, actually, a German steel manufacturing plant was compromised by the same variant of Stuxnet a little while ago. And so, interestingly enough, a lot of this code we talk about is sold and packaged on dark sites out there. So if you were a hacker, you could buy different pieces of code, assemble it together for yourself, and save yourself a lot of time and money by having some other malware already created for you to go and attack somebody. Sounds like kind of a weird thing to happen, but it's a black market of code and malware that's being sold out there.
It's not expensive.
No.
Whatever it is, they're easy and cheap to get.
Yeah. Thumb drive one, I want to share one with you because I just read about this 2 months ago. A study done with thumb drives in a very similar circumstance. 50% of all thumb drives that were found in this one study by a college, 50% of them were put into a computer automatically.
Really?
Yeah, so messages.
It's like the curiosity factor just overwhelms everybody's senses.
Right, so you're almost guaranteed if whatever you do, if you find a thumb drive somewhere, don't put it in your computer.
Please don't put it in your computer.
Let's share another one that happened to the Dalai Lama, and actually I'm going to take a 2-minute video here to talk about that's going to explain what happened to the Dalai Lama, and this is from a TED Talk.
In the summer of 2008, a country that shall not be named received a phone call from the Chinese government advising them against receiving His Holiness the Dalai Lama on an upcoming state visit. There was only one problem. The visit was secret. How could the Chinese have known? Well, the Dalai Lama turned to this team from the Information Warfare Monitor, the best of its kind, to help find the mole and neutralize the threat. And while James Bond had Q, who gave him the laser watch and, of course, the exploding pen, this team had Palantir. We gave them the ability to make sense of vast amounts of data and quickly differentiate between friend and foe. And what they found was truly amazing. The Dalai Lama did have a mole, but it wasn't human. They had been successfully targeted by Chinese spies, cyber spies. Using a technique called spear phishing, the Dalai Lama's computer infrastructure had been infected with a virus that gave the adversary control over their machines. So you may be familiar with phishing. This is the indiscriminate emailing of millions of people in the hopes of getting a few poor suckers to give up their login credentials. Spear phishing, as the name implies, is much more targeted. The adversary will research you, your interests, your friends, your behavior, and craft an email that plausibly comes from someone that you know. This email will have an attachment, a Word doc, or a PDF file. You'll open it, and you'll have been spear phished. The adversary now has control over your computer, which they can use to, for example, turn on your webcam to literally see and hear what you're saying in your office, send email to anyone as if they were you, and even exfiltrate data right off of your computer, including, as in this case, the Dalai Lama's negotiation position vis-a-vis China, a very useful thing to have if you're the Chinese. Think about how much spy tradecraft has changed. If James Bond wanted to steal a dossier, he'd have to come crashing through the front door in his Aston Martin, wrestle some man-eating worms, break some gorgeous girl's heart, grab the goods, and get rescued by the CIA. These guys literally took the goods while sitting at home in their pajamas. But the already intriguing plot actually thickens. So the good guys, armed with a heroic amount of Red Bull, shaken not stirred, uncovered a vast network of 1,300 computers in 103 countries that had been infected. The preponderance of these infections were against targets with interests in South and Southeast Asia, both countries and companies. This network, dubbed the GhostNet, had been active for 2 years and was highly active until the team made its existence public. So, as you can see, the face of espionage has changed. As recent events with Google have highlighted, the adversary targets both countries and companies for both political and economic gain. Your automated intrusion detection systems and firewalls can't keep them out. The adversary is patient and adaptive, and most importantly, targets the weakest part of your network, humans. So the next time you get an email with an attachment, beware. There just might be someone sitting on the other end in their bathrobe, eagerly trying to steal your most sensitive IP. Don't bother calling James Bond. Call on the cyber spies. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we want to do is cover a little bit of the specifics of some of these emails. And best we can see, and even from that message there, is that 90% of all the fraud starts at these emails. And you know, just to cover a few of these here, I have a couple that are my favorites that I've captured from a screenshot of what I've seen as issues, and just share some of the details and what to look out for. So as people are doing some of this and looking at emails, you know, what should be aware and knowing that they have an email that could be bad for them or probably compromised in some way.
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite ones.
Okay.
Just because it's designed very nicely. It uses AT&T's colors and logos.
Sure.
But, you know, it is voicemail. So how many times do you have multiple people receiving one voicemail that's supposed to be your phone? So, you know, you've got kind of the sender, the voicemail, you've got multiple recipients, so that should be the first red flag. And then you've got the attachment as a zip file, which, you know, normally if it's some kind of voicemail message, it's either going to be a WAV file or an MP3. It all depends on your voicemail system, but it's not going to be a zip file, which is a compressed file. Typically, if you see something like that come through, and you're not expecting it, you should be wary about it. And you should check it out. So, and the wrong date. You know, if you're receiving this, I think we actually took this screenshot last year, but still, it's 2 years overdue, now 3. If that doesn't match up for what you expect, it's just another clue to look for when you're getting these. And then missing information. You've got to contact us at AT&T support with no phone number, no email address, no nothing. So I don't think AT&T support is that bad that they wouldn't provide some kind of way to contact them. So it's, again, another breadcrumb to look for that it just doesn't look right, doesn't feel right. And if something doesn't feel right like this and it's got an attachment, don't open it.
Right. The one I've seen and people have approached me about in the last couple of weeks, it seems to be a rash of FedEx ones that have been going out. You notice that?
You and I talked about this a couple days ago, and I think since then I've gotten 4 more.
Yeah.
All a little bit different,
right?
But all designed with FedEx logos, colors, everything looks legitimate. But and I think on the next one you're going to show one where there's some other breadcrumbs again.
Yeah. So they're gonna the phishing emails are going out there indiscriminately to try to find someone who's going to click on something. Okay. And again, you may be expecting a package. That's why you might click on the FedEx one. You might be using Wells Fargo banks, which you may expect. Click on the Wells Fargo one. Again, it's very indiscriminate. This one was pretty good. If you can see here, this was from a couple years ago as well. But I thought what was really good about it was it had some real specific details that worked out. The email address here was correct, not to me, but somebody else in the company at ease, which said, okay, they know who they are. There was a zip file, which again flagged, as we just discussed, raising a concern. What I thought was interesting was the conversation here was a sense of urgency. And this is the kind of thing that might be sent to a finance department, hoping that someone in the finance department, because this was sent out at 5 p.m. on October 30th. And at that point, someone leaving the office might go, oh, here's an important email that came in from our bank. Let me make sure what's in here and double click on this attachment to make sure I understand what's happening. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create this sense of urgency. Note, the note in the bottom says this needs to be dealt with within 1 business hour, essentially. So someone leaving at the end of the day just may click on that because they're running out the door. So they're taking advantage of that sense of urgency that someone who may not look at all the details and just click, and that zip file would have had all the malware in it.
We see these specific ones where you're trying to create that sense of urgency to take an action easily multiple times per month.
Right.
I mean, it's gotten to the point where we've trained our clients
right.
well enough that once they see them, they just ignore them.
Right.
It's the people that have never seen one before that may be enticed to take that action.
And our challenges in supporting organizations is that we can have all the best technologies as we described with firewalls and updated information. This zip file with that malware in there could be enough that it could, once selected, it's going to bypass everything we've done already for that customer.
Exactly.
And we've had that happen.
And they count on that.
Right. And that's why it's being set up this way. You get the best technologies in place, that person clicks on this file, and then they're compromised. Another one here is example PayPal. Again, the name everyone recognizes, but the challenge is that this is not an attachment. It's actually a link to a server. And there are other ways that compromises can happen with files being injected into a computer remotely with this technique as well. Again, in here there's an awkward statement asking for more information. So it's sort of leading you down this path just to click this link. Most organizations now are not going to have you click a link to go to a server. They're going to tell you to do it. And what we're going to tell you to do is don't click the links. If you get an email that says go somewhere, don't click their link. Go type in the URL yourself and log into that account separately, not through the email that you get.
The other thing you can do is take your cursor and hover over that link.
Okay.
And it should display to you the web address of where it's going to take you. And that's what I did with some of those FedEx emails that came in just because I do order things from Amazon.
Sure.
I may get something from FedEx just to be certain. And it went to a completely different website. So that's another clue to look for. But you're right. Just go directly to the website if you think it's legitimate and check that way. Don't click on the links in these emails.
Again, these emails are where 90% of the compromises begin or initiated. So knowing and being familiar with these emails as they come in is going to really help anyone. And most importantly, and just not clicking quickly is the most important thing. Really read, understand what you're looking at. Here are some other things that are going on out there. I'm just going to move on to our next one. And this is part of the problem is, again, we make it too easy.
Hi, this is John from the corporate office with Starbucks.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I was just calling. We were having problems with people calling in and pretending they're the corporate office, and we just wanted to let you know that if anyone calls in and says they're with the corporate office, just not to give them any information and not to believe them.
Okay.
Because apparently people have been calling in and just making prank calls, I assume.
Okay, great.
Okay, and who's this?
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Sure, who's this I'm speaking with? And your last name?
Don, REMONT.
Okay, and what's your employee number, or I guess we could look it up by your cell phone number, whatever phone number's on file with us.
Wait, you just want my partner numbers?
Sure.
1, 3.
Okay, but do you have a phone number? Because that's the easiest way to look up your file here.
68.
And you remember that part where I said not to give out personal information to anyone pretending to be the corporate office?
Yes.
Why'd you just give me all that?
I don't know.
I'm a prank caller.
Because
Yeah, so I found these on YouTube, Matt, and there's literally dozens of them, if not hundreds of these examples of people making prank phone calls, and it sort of really makes it kind of clear as to how these compromises are so easily can happen. Whether, again, this woman's working in a Starbucks, she's very busy, you can hear it's a busy store, she's just saying yes, 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 and not carefully listening to what's being told to her, which is, hey, I'm about to prank you, and I'm doing it, and you're still helping me out, this kind of thing. So let's just take a quick look at some of these mechanisms for social engineering. We talked about email, thumb drive example already. Social media is another one. I'm not going to cover it here, but there are advertisements in social media and other places, and again, links that you may see or people may indiscriminately or unintentionally share with you. They just need to be wary of, is what it comes down to. Phone calls, we just gave you an example of, and then dumpster dives. And Matt, what's a dumpster dive?
A dumpster dive is where you are physically going through someone's trash, and in that case, you are likely looking for personal information so you can disguise yourself as somebody else.
Yeah.
So anything that has personal information that someone can use, you want to make sure you shred that before you throw it away or recycle.
And it's becoming more evident, and we'll discuss, that most of these compromises are starting to use combinations of situations. So let's get into ransomware a little bit, because this is the one that is so troubling, frustrates so many people in so many ways. So we want to cover a little bit more of how this happens, Travis?
So ransomware is a specific type of malware. Typically, it's going through an email link. Somebody is getting an email and clicking on something, so it is a phishing incident, and it's installing something called CryptoLocker or Crypto Vault. I've heard a couple different terms used for it, but it basically pops up a message on the screen that your hard drive is encrypted and you need to pay a ransom in order to get your personal files back. We've had, you're encrypting your entire hard drive, so the person can't get to anything, can't do anything on their computer unless they supposedly follow this advice. Now, we're up to about 400,000 hits in the U.S. alone. You and I were joking ahead of time that it's probably like a burger counter where it's just counting up minute by minute. The FBI recommends that you do not pay. We recommend that you do not pay. They're really the only good solution to this is not click on links that you're not sure about. But then if you are compromised, have a good disaster recovery solution. You want to have a good backup. You want to have something to go back to. So you may lose a day or two's worth of data or more, because these things can lie in wait before they launch and encrypt the data. So from our perspective, we're looking for the backup that is clean from that malware before we're restoring to it, to make sure we're not restoring to something that's there again, that's going to launch again. But we definitely do not recommend that you pay, because there's no guarantee that if you pay that you're actually going to get your data.
I don't know the exact number, but it's less than 30% of what I read, that when you do pay, you even get the right keys to unlock your hard drive again. So your odds are not in your favor if you pay that you're going to get the solution you need from these hackers.
Yeah, much better to do some pre-planning and have a good disaster recovery.
Which is going to cover you for many other things as well.
Absolutely.
So just to visualize this a little bit, so these hackers send out these indiscriminate phishing emails, like the attachments that we showed you. In those attachments are the zip files, and it can be actually not just zip files, by the way, too. It could be disguised PDFs, disguised Word documents. It could be any number of things that are going to disguise that package of a malware in, and it gets sent to any number of people. And once there, the crypto locker or crypto wall would name your flavor of this particular ransomware, encrypts your hard drive. You get a message. Some of the more recent ones want you to pay a Bitcoin, which is kind of electronic currency, and then they get sent to a bank and they get their money.
One other thing to add to that is some of these are self-replicating as well.
Right.
So if you have someone that does click on something and gets this, you want to make sure you get that off of your network immediately, and then call us or your IT vendor of choice and start from there. But make sure you take that off right away.
Next one is a little bit different, and it's not specific to ransomware. It's called wire transfer heist. There's basically two types we'll talk about. The first one is CEO fraud, and it has a couple different names, also called masquerading, where an executive in an organization is impersonated. The finance department is the target. What they're going to do is use a combination of email, spear phishing, with a phone call. So a spoofed email may be sent out to the finance department, for example, saying, hey, we need to send off $40,000 to this bank in the Caribbean. Here's the information that you need. The email comes from John Smith, the CEO of the company. I'm about to give you a phone call to confirm this. Please wait for my phone call. Phone call goes out, creates this sense of urgency. It's John Smith. I don't know John Smith. He's an important executive, though. I better act on this as he's directed me with an email and a phone call. I'm good to go. Well, as it turns out, there's been about 7,000 victims from this over the last 3 years, totaling about $750 million.
Oh.
So the amount of damage that's been done on this is pretty devastating. So this is the big one that's out there right now. And there was a company that I was reading about in Milwaukee that it kept on happening again and again and again. It was like, kept on calling. Hi, it's John Smith again. We're another $50,000, please. Happened for months.
We actually have seen this with smaller organizations too, and it's easier to manage because you can walk down the hall and talk to that person.
Right. It's happening all over. I see it at colleges, any number of organizations out there, but the scenario is still all the same. Spoofed email, often a phone call, wire transfer, and then kind of run it from there. Another type one is using actual code or malware, and this wire transfer heist has affected any number of organizations, anything from electric companies to escrow companies, and even the city of Poughkeepsie, for example, got compromised with this kind of technique. And I'll give you an example of how this happens. Basically, the wire transfer heist for this method is not really using a phone call, but the hackers create some code. It's very specific. In the case of this one hospital, I'll give an example of, they actually hired 100 home workers in California to work from home, set up some banking accounts that said, you're going to get paid through our bank, but we need to have a banking relationship established ahead of time. And you'll be receiving some information and more money, so we need to work this out. The hospital then is identified, email set up to get the malware installed, compromise happens, hackers are in place, and they start going to town. First thing they started doing was transferring a little bit of money out of $5. And how they did it technically, Matt, is they used what's called that keylogger thing. So that malware installed on there is a hidden set of code that when the finance department was accessing the bank, they type in all the credentials, authentication, and password, and all that information was being sent back to the hackers. So the hackers had all that data and then could either remotely or from their own location get to the bank and direct funds to be sent to, in this case, the home workers. They first started out with small amounts of $5. Then once they know it was working, they went for the big loot, and they over a period of 3 days had $1 million taken out of this one hospital.
Yeah. And these home workers are unaware.
No, they weren't involved. They were just pawns in part of the way it worked. Each of the home workers got like $10,000, thinking they were getting paid,
right,
but then realized they were getting actually money sent to their banks, and then the $10,000 were taken out of their account.
Right.
So it was a whole scheme that was being set up. This is a little more sophisticated, but just to let you know, this is kind of what's going on. Some lessons learned in some of this. We encourage in certain organizations to use a dedicated banking computer, one that wouldn't have email on it, for example. So it'd be sitting by itself, certainly having all the right, proper updates on it, things like that, but just not even having any email, so it couldn't be compromised in some way. Having good password policies about what type of passwords to use, how frequently they're changed, and making sure they're unique between sites. Wire transfer policies, working with your bank to make sure there's a good setup there that you have notifications, as well as your bank's going to be able to set up good controls with you as well. And I've seen a big increase in that. I mean, banks are obviously, trying to mitigate their risk and all this. So that's been changing rapidly, but it's still something we can take note of. Watch for small transactions. A local college here that I know and I work with caught this because they were seeing these strange $5 and $20 transactions happening to a strange account. They tracked it down, quickly realized they were in the middle of a compromise, and stopped the process from happening for themselves. Some of these can be long plays. I know I mentioned earlier that some of these take days. Some of these plays, like this one or the hospital one, it actually took weeks. So it can vary on how it happens. But again, we just want to show you the techniques that are going on so you're aware of and be better protected for yourself. One of the things to talk about is some of the exposure. I'm going to mention a few insurance aspects of this. Obviously not insurance agents, but a few areas just to think about, mention where the exposure to loss really falls. Some of it's obviously financial loss to the business, which is always in any disaster. Financial loss incurred by your customers, which your customers could come after you for. Employee data, Social Security, so there would be violations. Customer data, such as credit card numbers, things like that. These are the exposure areas. Trade secrets, typically in small businesses, not a big deal. Business interruption is another big one. So if you talk to your insurance agent about exposure to loss, they're going to want to talk to you about these kind of areas. And they have a crisis management and public relations expenses as well if you were to get caught in something that you needed to have covered. So they have products that match up to all this then as well. So what kind of insurances they have, there's data privacy liabilities, there's notification and credit monitoring, which you may have heard about from other compromises. So like Target and Home Depot and OPM have all provided credit monitoring. I get credit monitoring from my healthcare company because we were compromised. Sometimes I think it's all overlapping. I have 3 or 4 different credit monitoring at this point because there's so many different compromises.
I think I am in the same situation.
But somebody had to pay for it. There's insurance for that. There's crisis management. In some cases, an organization may need to have someone come in and help them out. There's insurance that would cover to have those people come in and help them plan for that. There's some regulatory costs that may be involved or fines. There's insurance for that. Forensics, cyber forensic may be needed. Again, coverage. And then we don't recommend this, but there is extortion insurance you can purchase for yourself. Again, the FBI. I want to cover the types of risk and the products that are available from insurance companies out there as well.
I need to see the deductible on that one.
I don't know. Obviously, insurance companies, and we all work with them, that they're going to want to make sure that you're following good business practices to mitigate their exposure on these things. And all of them are very good, as a matter of fact. And so, if you are getting insurance, you need to evaluate what products are the right fit for you. Obviously, having cyber extortion may not be the right fit. We don't encourage it. So you decide what's out there, but there's a whole host of products available. And honestly, even 5-7 years ago, some of these products were being offered, and really kind of looked at them like, I don't really need that.
Right.
Most organizations now, the risk managers are certainly going to their CFOs and talk about the idea that, we need to make these investments. Our exposure, no matter how good our technology is, how good our education is with our employees, we have exposure here. We need to manage that risk for ourselves. Speaking of risk, let's just again kind of summarize and talk about some of these for ourselves. One of the biggest ones, and we're doing this right now, and we provide this for our accounts as well as anybody who we can help out. Employee education programs like we're doing today are critical. Disaster recovery plans, as Matt mentioned. And when you say disaster recovery plan, what would somebody be thinking about, Matt, with something like this?
So with many of our clients, you want to be able to recreate your environment somewhere else. So even if it's, a fire in your building that doesn't necessarily affect your suite, but you need to move out for, say, a couple months period of time, you need to have a plan in place where you can recreate and get back to work within a minimum of a day or two, not a week or two, so that, your business downtime is managed. And what we do is we typically work with our organizations to find out, what is their toleration level, and then put a plan in place that kind of matches up that. So if somebody comes to me and says, I don't mind being down a week, then we put the appropriate tools in place to meet that time frame. If they say we need to be back up and running the next day, we put the appropriate tools.
Right.
But you have to talk about that. You have to find out what that toleration is and put a plan in place.
Keeping device updated is critical, as we've talked about, and everyone hopefully knows by now. Flash had 3 updates just the other week, I think. So that's an example of the number of updates that are coming out with just different applications, operating systems, mobile devices. Got to keep them all updated. We really encourage everyone to keep all their electronics updated with the latest operating systems, applications, and patches to help mitigate these issues. That's where these holes are exposed, these windows are left open, and where these cyber thieves come through is through these unupdated, unpatched systems and what they do. And they can even get to it before the window is closed, but that's certainly where things are exposed for them. Password policies, can't emphasize this enough. Strong, complicated passwords that are not used between sites. So what you use at your bank and what you use in Facebook are very completely different, and the long, complex passwords with characters and numbers in them every single time. And change them in frequency, that's pretty good. Wire transfer policies, as we mentioned, is important in working with your bank. Securing your device is just as simple as making sure that you have a 1 or 2 minute timer set that your computer or your cell phone would be locked up and you need to authenticate again is really critical. Instead of just leaving your cell phone laying around, you make sure it's secure for yourself. Cloud solutions, okay? We get a lot of questions about this because we are a cloud provider, but we feel very strongly that for most organizations, cloud solutions provide them a better security level than what they're able to obtain today on a couple different levels. One of which is a cloud environment has more security in place than what most people can provide for themselves in their own organizations, just flat out. No one has the ability to have a full staff, secure facilities, updates, all the things that are available in a cloud environment. You probably can't do for yourself. It's just not obtainable.
You definitely can. I mean, not without spending
a
gazillion dollars.
Right.
And the security is to the level where you and I couldn't just decide to drop in to take a look at our own cloud environment. We would have to have an appointment. We would have to be escorted by security. It is beyond what anybody would even think of doing on their own.
And then again, the ability that I think the strength is, and we've seen this for our own accounts, is the disaster recovery aspect of this. And I'll talk about it in a second. I don't want to get too much into it, but the disaster recovery aspect for cloud solutions is far superior to what anybody can provide for themselves. Tape backup or hard drive backups are swell, but quite honestly, the time to recovery from a cloud service environment is tenfold better than what you could do for yourself. And also another way to reduce risk, as mentioned, is looking at insurance options for yourself. Want to mention about a particular, and actually, hopefully you've seen this in your control panel. It's a document called Safeguarding Taxpayer Data. I know many of the folks on the webinar today are accountants. This was released last October by the IRS. It's an updated document. If you haven't received it, you should see this. I'm looking for it.
There is a handout section below the questions section with a number 1 next to it. And if it's not open, if you click on that arrow to the left of handouts, you'll see that document. You'll be able to download that yourself.
Right. Again, it shows it as an icon, as a PDF, and this is a PDF that the IRS provides. And whether you're preparing taxes or not, the information in here, I think, is some of the best that we've seen that helps anyone assess their risk, take actions and plans to help themselves understand things they can do for their own organization or even personally to safeguard not only their client data, but their computers themselves and the data they may have.
Their own data.
Yeah, exactly. So that's there for you. You can click on that and download that. You can also go to the IRS's website and find that as well. This is the latest one they've provided, which came out last October. Let's see if there are any questions in here. Do have one. Okay, one question is, we have somebody in our office. They are going around the internet quite a bit. We don't really monitor what they do. Should we be concerned about where they go and what they do?
If you have, I would absolutely provide some kind of education for your people to let them know of the risks that are out there.
Right.
And some of the emails, just kind of give them examples of like we did today, just so that they're not blindly clicking on attachments and things like that, and links to servers. If you have, antivirus, anti-malware, your firewall are all up to date and being monitored, you can, go around the internet safely, but you just need to be careful and you need to have the right tools in place.
Yeah. Still, again, emails are where most of the compromises are happening. So be wary of what those email attachments particularly are coming in. Next one is still an often question we hear and discuss is it better for me to be on a Macintosh system or a Windows system?
Well, I personally use a Mac and I like it very much, but that does not make me immune.
Right.
There are definitely malware things out there for the Mac. Just from a percentage, though, I mean, Windows is still the larger target, just because they have more market share. So if I had to put the odds, your odds are better with a Mac, but it doesn't mean that you're completely safe.
Right.
So I don't want to suggest that anybody should have a false sense of security just because you're using a Mac. You should still take the same precautions and make sure you still have good antivirus and a good firewall and all the things that we talked about today.
Right. Another follow-up question, same person here, is about mobile devices. And been looking at this closely. The question is, is my mobile device safe, and do I need to be worried about my mobile devices? And I think their question was more towards, is Android safer or iOS safer? And its similar answer is that it's almost an odd situation. The number of people that are writing, and it's so easy for people to break into and create opportunities for themselves within the Windows platform. They're spending all their time there. Are Android devices and iOS devices susceptible? Absolutely. But like Matt said, don't provide anybody a false sense of security. All the same things we're encouraging to do, best practices because of social engineering, follow them on all your devices. It'll help mitigate that. But clearly something like 99% or more of all malware and compromises happen on a Windows platform. It's just where it's at.
Now, mobile is growing every year. Yeah. And I think, personally, I think Android is the larger target just because it's easier. I mean, there are packages, just like we described, there are packages that you can buy to put together malware. The same thing exists for Android, right, because it's an open system. But that doesn't mean that you're completely 100% safe in iOS. So, right, if you're on public Wi-Fi with your mobile devices, you want to use common sense. You don't want to do banking on a public Wi-Fi. You don't want to put your credit card into, to do shopping. Wait till you're at home on a secure network that is good before you do those types of things.
Yeah, I had a blog post just about this last week that I probably put in our newsletter about, how to keep yourself protected while you're traveling. And there's tips along those lines as well, using a VPN or cloud services, or what are the things you can do to keep yourself better protected while you're traveling, because it's not just the emails. That's the majority of it all, but there's other things that you get compromised when you're just at an airport and you see free Wi-Fi, for example.
Exactly.
Don't use free Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
That's a honeypot for bad trouble for yourself, that kind of thing. Another question, what's your recommended anti-malware in general for Macs?
That's a very good question. I'm going to have to follow up on that one. We typically use...
I think I use Sophos.
Sophos for antivirus, right? Which honestly, it's not specifically designed for anti-malware, but it's caught. It is definitely catching the malware and the regular viruses. So Sophos is a free tool that's out there for the Mac. It doesn't really bog down the system as much as some of the other ones like Symantec and McAfee. Both have products. I believe McAfee has a specific anti-malware as well as antivirus for the Mac, but it does get a little boggy in terms of usability. But they're good products. I mean, there's a couple of things out there. I personally use Sophos, and I've been very happy with what it's been catching.
I'll follow up with a detail, with a link to the name of the company for everybody. So about that one.
Yep.
There's another question about the cost of cloud security. And I think it may be a little bit more specific to their organization, so I might contact that person directly about this particular question. So I do see it. I'll take care of a direct question with you on that one. Just to follow up, we're going to wrap things up. We're getting near the end. Our next webinar is in September. It's something a little bit newer for us. We're going to be doing what is the Internet of Things. And Matt and I are going to cover details for everyone about how it relates to government, personal, as well as business, and just sort of take a quick kind of lunch and learn scenario as we're doing today about what is the Internet of Things, how it's affecting people, and what you can expect for yourself personally or your business about how it may be involved with that.
Should be fun.
Yeah. And finally, just want to mention our cloud service again. I am more than happy to talk with anybody specifically or directly about their needs and how we can help them out with this. But our Ease Cloud service, we believe, provides increased security. We're reducing people's capital costs because they no longer have to eliminate their servers. Provides them the ability to work from anywhere on any device. So if you're using Windows, with our service, you can actually have a Macintosh and still run your Windows systems from that device, or your iPad, or even your iPhone. So we virtualize your office, provide a cloud solution that's more secure and reducing your servers in a way that really will help you out and on any device you're working with. So more than happy to talk with anybody about that. I want to thank everyone for their time today. Matt, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, please direct them to Dave at easetech.com. I have a blog and newsletter I send out information. This webinar has been recorded, and I will share that link with you as along with the other questions that came up. And finally, there's a survey, and appreciate your feedback. All right, thanks, everybody. Have a great day.